Mr. Bungle. I remember I once put this band on at work, and it ended up with one of my co-workers shouting at me like, "This isn't fucking music." It was funny. Not to be obnoxious, I'm not one of these guys who likes to show off like, "Guys, look how weird my taste is." It's just what happened. I like Mr. Bungle, I like Mike Patton generally. Faith No More have bangers. Generally, Patton gets around. You see him popping up in many schizo places, jumping around many different genres, making a lot of different styles of music. Way I would put it is if Faith No More is the Sex Pistols, then Mr. Bungle is Public Image Limited. Not a perfect analogy by any means. Faith No More have some kinda out there shit under their belt themselves, as well as generally being a lot better than the Sex Pistols were. Point is, Mr. Bungle is that project where Patton felt free to just go off the rails, start bouncing off the walls like a madman. The first album is deranged and demented. That's the one I put on at work. Lots of fun, that one. The second album gets incredibly out there. To be honest, it's due a re-listen for me. I don't remember it too well. I just remember it being mad. Their third album, California, is still mental, sometimes arguably too mental, but this is actually them reeled in, making a more coherent effort. California is based. It's awesome. It started this huge beef between Mr. Bungle and Red Hot Chili Peppers, as both bands were on the same label, Warner Bros. And the label pushed back the release of California as the Red Hot Chili Peppers album Californication was coming out around the same time. And those are similarly named albums, so they didn't want them cutting up each other's success. Following this, for some unknown neurotic reason, Anthony Kiedis had Mr. Bungle removed from a bunch of festival lineups and really fucked them financially. Mr. Bungle started pretending to be the Red Hot Chili Peppers at live shows, which was really funny. You can see footage of it where the band are pretending to inject heroin into their arms on stage and shit like that. This just made Kiedis more mad, and he started using his influence to get Bungle removed from even bigger festivals. And it really fucks the band out of a lot of money again, and is possibly a contributing factor to why Mr. Bungle called it quits after California. Kiedis is quoted on the matter saying, "I would not have given fucking two fucks if they fucking played there with us. But after I fucking heard about the fucking Halloween show where they mocked us, fuck him and fuck the whole fucking band. I hope they all die." Funny part of music history if you ask me. But enough of this tangent. Getting back on track. What is the deal with California? This album that we will be talking about today. Well, even though I've listened to Mr. Bungle for years, I couldn't answer this question before I started making this video. I can admit that I never thought to wonder what this music was all about. Really, there's enough crazy shit on the surface to keep you occupied. Spending some time to consider the meaning of these songs, however, I've learned that this album actually has a lot to say. Specifically, it has a lot to say about California and the people that live there. This album takes the piss out of Silicon Valley and the trendy, shallow, thoughtless, phony masses. It satirically parades around retro styles such as doo-wop and old rock and roll and surf. Styles that had come back into fashion in a retro sort of sense at the time. Exotica, forms of lounge or easy listening and more. These kinds of styles that are corny seeming now, all flaunted around everywhere mockingly. The album makes a very surreal meal out of all of these styles and these retro fantasies. It gives off that impression of insistence upon these things until you're utterly sick of it, nauseated by people living these fake lives. The production on this album is mint, very well done, makes everything dreamlike and soft-edged, and it allows these moments where it feels like everything is being sucked up into a whirlpool or something like that. Soft, surreal destruction. Sometimes it's a little too cushiony for my liking, but really the album would be nowhere near as surreal without this production. It's necessary. I came to understand that the songs on this album are in fact very thoughtful. I would like to go ahead now and jump into going through the album track by track, and then you can see what I mean with the songs being thoughtful. We start off with Sweet Charity, a very catchy song that feels like a parody of the idealized vision of what perfection looks like. There's a serenity and nostalgia to the track. The song certainly feels very heavenly, almost as if we are ascending to heaven at points. But it's interesting that the instrumentation often inspires visions of beaches, kicking back, sunbathing in your expensive resort, drinking cocktails, unconcerned. This is the idea of what heaven is, seemingly. It's a vision of perfection, and yet it doesn't seem to satisfy the protagonist in this song. He is asking to be saved from this. The lyrics aren't very straightforward at all, but what I notice about them is this kind of listing off of pleasurable activities, kind of like ideal American visions of what makes a good and satisfying life. Perfect photographs and postcards, the Grand Canyon, traveling around the world and seeing the sights. You make all of these memories so that on your deathbed, you can look back in the satisfaction that you lived a meaningful life. Seems like wisdom, but what the protagonist here is realizing after a life of putting this idea into action is that the whole time he has been numbing himself. Underneath all of this bliss of the song is a great anxiety and uncertainty. There's a desire to escape in this song. And that's what he's been trying to do by living this pristine life. The kind of life you would expect to inspire only peace and satisfaction. And there's this sort of mental dread in the question that our protagonist asks, which is, if this isn't peace and security and contentment, then what is? Where can I possibly escape to? Towards the end of the song, he's pleading for escape more and more. And it's almost like a disorienting whirlwind if you're really convinced of this idea I have laid out. This very existential moment. I imagine him like walking around this place that few are privileged to ever set foot in, yet he cannot appreciate it at all, and his head is spinning, and now he's asking for the heavens to swallow him up. He is completely out of ideas on how he could find peace in his life. He doesn't know what heaven would entail, but he wants it to save him. He wants some unknown thing to save him because he feels out of options. And it leads to this point where it drives him mad, as he switches the word heavens with asylums. He has nowhere left to go in life except for the heavens and the asylums, which makes the whole seeing the sights thing feel a lot more humorous. Him quite literally running out of places to go and realizing the shallowness of it all and just going mental. He's travelled everywhere, but really he just needed to look within himself, in line with the much laboured concept that you'll never find the cure for your suffering by searching outside, and you have to instead search for it within yourself. So perhaps the song is a criticism of materialism as well. And I guess all in all, it pierces the illusionary, idealistic visions people have of fame and success bringing contentment and happiness. It ain't that simple. I've spun all of this again out of some very non-straightforward lyrics, but it makes sense to me, especially with the feeling of the track. It very much does bring bliss, but only for a bit. The last half of the song needs to be viewed as spinning out of control. It very much feels like the curtain of this ideal is starting to be drawn back in real time as you're listening to this. The production on this song is really what gives power to the bliss of it all. It engulfs everything in a way that makes it all so soft and silky, and it's where that feeling of ascension comes from. Mike's delivery here really gives the first impressions of things not being all they're made out to be. He sings as if weakened in a sense, not much power at all in it. The goofy doo-wop backing vocals really start to take on an almost mocking tone, like they're reinforcing the environment around our protagonist onto him. That environment that he is understanding to be a lie. I love all of the switch-ups in this song, especially present in the second verse. It's almost like trying to distract yourself with different things, trying everything to find that satisfaction. On top of all of this, I would like to say that the song is just really cool. I mean, I'm not thinking about it so deeply most of the time. You just can't fail to love those serene, soaring strings, and I appreciate the almost James Bond feel of the whole thing. Jumping back and forth between these really cool moments and these parts that make swaying palm trees come to mind. Very good opener, and it's been my favourite on the album for years. None of them knew they were robots is a very strange song, to say the absolute least. The lyrics are mostly barely discernible, kind of murmured, sometimes distant. Very much channels the circus-like energy that Mr. Bungle are so infamous for. It's very disorienting in all of its different twisting styles interweaving with one another and shuffling around in pecking order so constantly. A lot of space-age pop being channeled on this song, especially in its quieter moments, but you can also hear it ringing out in the background during the choruses, with sounds you would expect to accompany something like a space arcade game. The chorus here again is a very very good example of the way this album flaunts around these old-timey styles with such humour. You can imagine like three men in suits all synchronized, clicking and stepping while singing this chorus. Really corny like. This song reminds me of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but more old-timey, like playing Fallout on acid or something. The lyrics on this one were written by guitarist Trey Spruance, and they're absolutely littered with scientific references, religious references too. Trey himself says that the point of this song is to demonstrate that the super scientific rationalist worldview stems from the same place as severe and strict religious dogmatism, and it pins both as being reductive when trying to comprehend existence in its totality. I must admit, it's not the most straightforward thing to pick up on, though it certainly brings meaning to the title and the line in the song, "None of them knew they were robots." I see it like saying that none of the rationalists realize that they're operating in that same monotheistic way that the irrational theists are. They're running off the same programs. I'll be real, I don't know much about a lot of the things being referenced in this song, such as the Omega point. I feel like you have to be mad knowledgeable about science to really understand all of the references going on here. But I do pick up on bits and pieces that contributes to this idea that we are limiting ourselves from seeing or experiencing wholeness through our doctrines. Like these lines here, they stole the great arcanum, the secret fire. Moloch found his gold for the new empire. Once again, the necrophage becomes saint. These doctrines apply limitations on thought and actually work to suppress spiritual experience. As spirituality is not free to be expressed and has to operate within boundaries and rules, whether this be the rules of a doctrine like Christianity or the flat-out dismissal of the whole of it that comes with basing your beliefs on empirical science. When you have a skewed view of things like this where you only consider one aspect of things, the things you end up valuing become very different and don't account for certain needs. The needs of the soul, for example. An entity such as Moloch can become powerful given these circumstances. The standards of those who may be venerated deplete massively as sainthood is rendered an obsolete honour. A lot of the song is quite difficult to grapple with for me. I do, however, appreciate the shade thrown at St. Augustine. That man ruined Christianity with his doctrine of original sin. He imposed shame and mental slavery upon humanity for thousands of years and ruined the once liberating force that was Christianity, all because he couldn't control his erections and insisted that this meant that free will couldn't possibly exist. It was, dare I say, the ultimate pervert. His bonus so out of control that it sent humanity into the Dark Ages. The lyric referencing him here says, "In the black iron prison of St. Augustine's light." Sounds like that shame imposed onto humanity to me, the effect of which is still felt all this time later. That's what the prison is. As Western society is very much based on Christian values still, even if atheism has risen massively. There's a sort of apocalyptic feeling the lyrics end up having here, as it starts talking about the beast, Leviathan, almost as if this headfast worship of science and technology brings on disaster. A part of us dies or goes unacknowledged, and we pretend everything is fine. The song is about many things, but it's also about an age of ease brought on by nanomachines. These nanomachines, they can do anything. They can work as spray-on clothes. They can work to make up the appearance of someone deceased. They can be used to simulate all of life. And at the point in which these nanobots are commonplace and used by societies at large, how can you ever possibly know what is simulated and what is not? It's this progression of technology that takes us into a realm where we can never be certain what is real and what's not, as these nanobots are microscopic. None of them knew they were robots. Not just themselves, but others too. We may see the body of the beast or Leviathan and believe it to be the real thing, as there is no way to know the difference. This line in the first verse that read, "The new Franklins fly their kites, and the postmodern empire is ended tonight." This is what the introduction of these nanobots is the beginning of a new era. And we're entering into a new era of imagination, where anything can be simulated. And this should sound familiar because though we don't have nanobots, we do have AI. And AI, when it's in full form, will be able to simulate anything. And we are already approaching rapidly that time when no one will be able to tell what is reality and what is fiction anymore. I actually recently made a video about that called The Age of Rationality is Coming to an End. When reality and fiction blends together, it will bring on a new age of thought, one where being monotheistic would be seen as foolish, because the nature of information only now affirms to you that you can't solidly believe in anything at all. You can't be certain of anything, but then that means that you can consider all things. It's very interesting to see this song in 1999 basically expressing what we are now on the verge of moving into. But I suppose it makes sense as science stems from science fiction, and you could probably ascertain that something like this would happen off the back of technology being capable of replication being invented. Nanomachines of course fits the old-timey personality of this song much better than AI would. Nanomachines are quite a charming concept. But yeah, I certainly don't understand the significance of every lyric in this song, but there are in fact a lot of them. I think I understand this song's deal now though. I want to furthermore express just how disorienting the whole thing is. And I suppose it does work very well hand in hand with that idea of nothing being discernibly authentic or real anymore. There are parts where Mike's vocals roar demonically in the midst of it all. Perhaps a representation of the beast. Perhaps the beast will manifest through nanomachines. Maybe we open the portal to hell itself through nanomachines or through AI. Catman is optimistic about the future though. He doesn't think that will happen, but it is interesting to think about. The next song, Retro Vertigo, is written by bassist Trevor Dunn. And I want to give a shout out to Trevor Dunn because this song is much easier to understand than the previous two without giving up on any of the effect the album has so far carried. Really a criticism of vain consumerism depicted through the revival of retro fashions that was blooming at the time this song was created. There's this recreation of the good old days that this album has already been satirizing thoroughly, but here it is directly scrutinized as a sickening thing. These people are privileged enough to spend their time lost in nostalgia for a time they never even lived through, living in naive fantasy. They play like this all the while the world is dying. There are people starving. I guess it really boils down to being sickened by the vanity people are consumed by, given the amount of suffering that happens in the world. Their comfortability is deplorable. Retro Vertigo as a concept, Trevor Dunn has stated to be the nauseous state that he finds himself in when confronted with this phenomena. Every famine virtual. The tragedies of the world are things we are very desensitized to, and the seriousness in which they should be treated has diminished as it's become associated with such commodities as you would find on the television. I have very distinct memories of adverts coming on the TV showing gaunt, starving African children, and my mum just being like, oh for fuck's sake, where's the remote, and changing the channel. The ability to tune these things out comes very easy. Why consider and feel when you could just change the channel? There's a big criticism of nostalgia in this song, and I do think that nostalgia is bad for you really. One of the more subtly entrapping forms of comfort. If you yearn for the past too much, or you wish to crawl back into the womb, really it helps no one. We must move forwards, not backwards. Trevor sees it all as perverse, the LARPing and role-playing and fantasizing, as well as the way suffering is debased within all of this and treated less seriously. Blasted out onto the TV, their suffering commodified for all to see, but they have no other option. This song makes me feel pretty confident in my understanding of the two previous tracks as well. Generally the themes seem to be pretty in line. These lifestyles being phony, the disillusionment with it all. The instrumentation is quite emotional to me. The melody and gentle guitar through the first half of the song is fantastic. It feels like it's cutting the bullshit and delivering to you less of a satirical mockery and more of a serious criticism imbued with a lot of passion and emotion. I really like Patton's vocal delivery on this song. Of course he can't just come onto the track normally, but his vocal harmonies are really special here, especially during the portions near the start where he's singing more softly. But when his singing becomes resoundingly strong, it's of course still great. Hard for me to place exactly why this delivery works so well, but I suppose it may be because it all again feels much more serious. Mike Patton feels caring here even. Towards the end of the song it explodes into being very rocky, and this part is great too. I appreciate the drums during all of that. All in all though, I think my favourite part of it is the tender beginning of the song. Again, Mike's vocals there are just so great. The next song is the Air-Conditioned Nightmare, which takes the form of a Beach Boys song, at least for a bit anyway. It ends up going off the rails quite quickly, switching up between styles as if constantly changing the channel on a radio. But it starts off with vocals that remind me of Pet Sounds. Don't Cry, Put Your Head on My Shoulders comes to mind especially, and the instrumentation only serves to reinforce this Pet Sounds imitation. However, out of this springs some very sarcastic music, constant ba-ba-ba-bas, and you can hear the literal shuffling of feet, leading into a chorus which cashes in on that built-up sarcasm, expressing a desire for death, expressing disdain for life, later moving into these quite emotional slow parts, still humorous but quite emotional, being comprised of just percussion, organ-like keys, and light strings. I think this song is about how comfort is your enemy, how the pursuit of it will rot your brain and make your life meaningless. This very much aligns with what I was talking about with my interpretation of the first song, and it's cool to see it displayed here less subtly. At the beginning of the song, during that whole Beach Boys part I was on about, our protagonist is talking about how empty he feels, how he doesn't even feel like a person anymore. We come to learn what he wishes to escape from, and what is likely to inflict these feelings upon him is the air-conditioned nightmare. Air conditioning you would take to be an agent of comfort, something that relaxes you, keeps you cool, but he can't stand it. He claims it rots your brain, and what he means by this is that it subdues you, it keeps you tame, satisfied. And so when you're enveloped by comfort like this, you stop caring about ambitions, you stop striving for your goals, because you've been made already satisfied, you've been tamed. More so when you've been infected by these comfortable things and you realise this and are trying to get away from them, you start to crave them and feel like you're not whole without them. You're caught in this trap where you recognise how comfort is holding you back, but you feel deprived without it. If one is to crave hardship and adversity and uncomfortability, they're seen as mad or weird generally. But it only makes sense to hate comfort. If you need comfort, then you retreat in pivotal moments. You sink into vice and routine and numbing things. These are blunt and critical ways to put these things, but in actuality, most people partake in them. And it's very easy to see that which makes you comfortable as a good thing. But I guess it all really depends on what one wants from life. If your only ambition going through life is to just feel okay, and these things are going to be very appealing to you. Going back to that vision of someone laying back drinking their cocktail by the beach, this is a cool and satisfying vision to most people. But if it was your whole life, your entire reason for existing, that personally to me seems a little perverse, and certainly seems perverse to our protagonist. Those visions of happiness he describes as illness, everyone subdued, everyone just desiring to enter their cocoons and feel pleasure and nothing deeper than that. He finds all of this inescapable, it surrounds him completely, and he himself has been very much guilty of this pleasure seeking. It's why he feels so empty. But the world around him just reinforces that emptiness further. He ends up throwing himself to his death upon realising the way in which he's wasted his life and essentially being broken at the end of it. He's crippled in a wheelchair, and you know this could be literal, like his life of hedonism destroyed his health, but I figure it's more like a metaphor saying that this way of life handicapped him. He springs up from this wheelchair and plunges himself to death. Probably the most extreme liberating metaphor you could have used in this scenario. The ultimate way to combat comfort is to do something so extreme, and it reminds me a lot of those Gnostic tales where someone will just like defy everything in their life, and it would bring a massive sense of liberation to them. And that liberation comes at the end of the song when he gets his halo with a ding, where he says now that the bandages are gone, it's like those bandages represent comfort. It's his aid that reimburses him and helps him cope with pain and displeasure. Now that these are removed, he sees rainbows everywhere. It very much adds to the feeling of liberation. It's practically a happy suicide, like he's beat the game, escaped the Matrix. Of course, it's all very humorously framed. I really like this line, "My wet dream is drying up," as a wet dream is a dream of utmost pleasure, but a dream is still a dream, merely an illusion, and it's dried up, it's over, meaningless now, and he understands how meaningless it always was. And also this visualization of a dried up wet dream is just gross, innit? and it's especially morbid when you consider that his life was defined by this image. Next we have the song Ars Moriendi. This song is very like Mexican or generally Latin feeling anyway. It's not an influence, the song just straight up is Latin music through and through. I guess besides the explosive metal-like parts and the club-like bass that starts pounding randomly as well. There's this part where it feels like the lyrics are being delivered by a mariachi band, but it constantly switches up even if it stays in this consistent theme of Latin music. If this song were in a Disney film, our protagonist would be being like flung around everywhere a mile a minute, and many different characters would be singing this song at different locations. The percussion here is pretty notable to me. It feels kind of overdone in this slightly absurd way. Much too many claps and slaps going on if you ask me, but maybe I'm tripping. You can view this song as a continuation of the last song after the guy kills himself. Like the processes happening after death that are hard for us mortals to really comprehend at all with our living worldly knowledge. It's all very Day of the Dead-like, very grim Fandango-esque. I guess the point of the song is to find humour in death. There are lyrics in Latin here, which when translated say, laugh if you are wise. I do generally think that it is a great power to have, this ability to laugh at all things, to find humour and take pleasure in any situation. The enlightened laugh at funerals, and furthermore, they laugh at adversity and all pain that is inflicted upon them. That appears to be the lesson of this song. You have this part about your bones laughing as someone dances on your grave. Why the need to feel disrespected by such a thing? Because you were told it's disrespectful. Because you were programmed that way. Why not think for yourself and be able to have whatever reaction you want to everything that happens? There's not all that many lyrics to go off here compared to other songs, but I feel I have a decent understanding. This is just what after death feels like, so if anyone is worried about what things are like after death, I would stop worrying because this is a blast. I mean, the energy here is great. It's all very lively, ironically enough. Even beyond that, whatever happens after death happens. Probably not really a need to worry about it. That's just gonna make the life you living worse. Next we have the classic Pink Cigarette. Everyone loves Pink Cigarette. It's probably the fan favourite on the album. Everyone goes on about how it's the best song of all time. And while it isn't my favourite, I can understand it as the concept of the song is very well done. It's about this guy who gets completely walked over by his girl all the time. Her infidelity is palpable. She leaves our guy many scars, and yet he can't get over her. Always goes back to her, only to further get hurt. The perspective we're hearing in the song is after they've just had an argument about her being with other men, and she eventually cracks, slaps him, cries, and admits it all the men she's been with, and then she leaves. Being hurt one time too many, our protagonist decides to do something drastic to get revenge on her. He writes a note for her and decides to kill himself in an attempt to make her hurt the way she made him hurt. And his method? Throughout the song, he makes note of the pink cigarette she left behind in his bed. Pink because her lipstick was left on it presumably, as these lipstick stains remind him of all the places her lips have been, on other men's lips and not his. His method of suicide is smoking this cigarette, putting those lipstick stains up to his mouth for a last indirect kiss, and then letting the cigarette burn the sheets of the bed, setting everything ablaze. He decides to defiantly burn himself to death. At a point he says that he hopes the smoke will hide the look of shame on his face. I don't think he has to worry about that, as in the background during the end of the song, we can hear distant subdued screams of pain, the sound of our guy burning to death. I think he's going to be a charred mess by the end of it. This part at the end where he's talking about how there's so many hours until you find me dead feels really cathartic to me. There is undeniable resolve in taking this action. It's almost admirable in a sense, only it isn't, because we know he does this because he is pathetic really. He could just leave this woman, find someone else, but he wants her to suffer and is willing to take himself out to make her. I mean, he is quite literally ashamed, it says in the lyrics. In terms of the music, it's a very swishy sort of song. Reminds me a bit of that song Angel Baby. Maybe one of the only doo-wop tunes that doesn't come off as really corny now. It has a similar light swaying in the drums and the guitar. The intro to Pink Cigarette actually sets it all up very well, I think, as it feels like a lot of drama has kicked off and there's a certain sense of dread. I like to think the lighter music that makes up the rest of the song starts when his eyes catch sight of the pink cigarette and he has this kind of epiphany and and comes up with this twisted revenge plot. In a sense, this song is another liberation, as it takes this retro romantic doo-wop style, something that has previously been established as something of an empty comfort trap, and it burns the whole thing down. It's like an effigy they're torching, and really does feel quite liberating, especially in those cathartic, distant screams of pain. Maybe I just sound mental, but I think this is definitely the intention. Extreme metaphors of liberation infused with dark humor and defiance. That's what this album is all about. I think it especially works here because the retro styles aren't being mocked in the way some of the tracks do, and they make it all very luscious as a matter of course. They make the music have the most ideal romantic shtick to it. And yet in the story of the song, everything goes wrong in this relationship. The romance being paraded around is completely disrespected and dead, and further still, the song takes on this individual sense of liberation, doing an action that all other people would condemn and say, don't do that, that's the wrong thing to do. But in this man's steadfast mind, it's the right thing to do. And perhaps him protesting against this evil woman like this is much the same as Tibetan monks self-immolating, something already referenced on this album in None of Them Knew They Were Robots. Now don't get me wrong, the Tibetan monks were certainly much more noble, and if you've ever seen that one video, you know that they tank that pain like absolute warriors, whereas our protagonist in the song, he's doing all of this because he is pathetic, and when he does it, he screams and writhes in pain, but he bears through that pain, all to make his point known to this woman. And I call him pathetic, but again, that's just my opinion. In his mind, perhaps, he is resolvedly convinced that this is exactly what needs to happen, and while he is burning, and life is leaving him, he is satisfied knowing that he won, and feels liberated. This whole tangent, I guess, was just to say that the themes here are much beyond any desire or comfort or nostalgia. They're extreme, philosophical, liberating, and extremely defiant against this comfort that the band views as a disease. The next song is called Golem 2, the Bionic Vapor Boy, and it's some absolute freak circus shit. I don't think a single lyric is really discernible here. It's like some electro version of Jack in the Box music. This is in fact pure Jack in the Box music. You can even hear someone winding up a Jack in the Box at the start of the song. One of the most disorienting and jarring songs on the album, probably the most. Incredibly strange, a little bit creepy too. All of the vocals feel mentally vacant and surreal. The song was written by Trey Spruance and very much tackles the same themes as None of Them Knew They Were Robots does. This Trey Spruance guy could see the future, I swear, because here he is talking about artificial intelligence. A second coming through simulation. Not a second coming of Christ in this song though. A second coming of Gollum. Not Smeagol, but the Golem from Jewish mythology. They are creatures made of clay that are brought to life through mysticism. They are like simulated lives. So the second coming of Gollum that this song talks about is those lives that can be simulated through artificial intelligence. And we're seeing this currently. Trey Spruance is seemingly obsessed by this idea that we will not be able to know what is real, and elements of real life will become fake like TV shows. There may be entities that live out their lives among us as regular human beings, but they don't even really exist and are just AI. Conflating fake people and real people may lead to human life being commodified. The song also makes a certain point very clear, and that's that these AI golems, these replicants of us, they're superior to us in every kind of way, and this poses a threat to us. Attributes they're ascribed with include human mind correcting and war directing. And I can already think of examples of how these two things are happening right now. You know, like I've already said, I like to view the future optimistically, but this song really does a good job at making AI seem scary. I mean, this song is just completely deranged and a little bit disturbing if I'm honest. The next song is The Holy Filament, which is relievingly normal, at least compared to the last song. It doesn't rock the boat much at all, but there is a sense of offness to it, like a feeling of being small among the giganticness of what surrounds you. This is relevant when you consider that the song is about how we are in an age where humanity worships technology. We give everything to it. All of our information. We rely on it for so much of what we do. We let it handle everything like it's the forces of nature or something. We are supplicated before the machines. Paired with the last song, I suppose the feeling in this track is very much one of loss of control, loss of power. Fear of technology taking over and being forced into servitude. I do really like the music in this song. It feels so uncertain and insecure at points. Like the piano, for example. At times it does feel assured in itself, but when paired with the other towering elements of this song like the vocals and strings, it feels smothered and insecure. The song isn't about losing comfort or losing control entirely, losing safety as a species. And this is what we rush headfast towards. This is what Mr. Bungle fears, and they want to put that fear in me. It works a little bit. I've just got a positive outlook on things, innit? But I see where they're coming from, for sure. Vanity Fair brings a return to that absolute piss-take stuff. Those deep voices making wow sounds like a cappella and shit all over the track. This is one of the more conventional tracks on the album, just like a straight-up doo-wop thing. Only sometimes the instrumentation, such as the saxophone or piano, ends up being slightly too over the top, and the whole thing becomes a little unbalanced and smothering. I do enjoy Patton's vocal melodies a lot here. A very normally structured song, but it's pure deception. Nothing usual happens in this song. The protagonist of this one cuts his dick off and he's happy about it. It's like a freeing thing, as now he doesn't have to deal with the temptations of lust and sex. He can be pure now that he's cut his dick off. So many moments in this track foreshadowing that ultimate moment of snipping. You know, God saves those who save their skin from the bondage that we're in. Bless the eunuch and bless the Skoptsi. I mean, I kinda admire in a way the boldness of such an action in the name of purity. That defiance against lust that makes one resolved enough to mutilate themselves and be happy with it. Again, it feels somewhat like a Gnostic tale. These actions that most won't understand and will condemn. Actions that scare and shock, but in the mind of the person doing it, it's simply the correct thing to do within their own story. Like, fuck what all these other people think. It was never a concern of mine. I'm gonna cut off my own dick and find salvation. Even though it of course makes me reel back a little, I appreciate it as being this resolved following of the schizo path. We all have our own individual schizo paths we need to follow. Whether we follow them or just go along with what everyone else is doing is another topic entirely. But it just so happens that this guy's schizo path involves him cutting his dick off. I mean, he doesn't regret it in the song. He feels elated about it. Sexuality very much does feel imposed upon us all. Whether it's society or biology, there's no escaping it really. I'm sure we've all had those moments where we thought, I would be better off if I just didn't have a dick. Even if just for a moment, after thinking with your dick got you into some trouble or something like that. If you didn't have to contend at all with sexuality, there would be far less distractions. You would be able to focus all of your time into your interests, into what you're passionate about. But no man is ever free from temptation, and likely temptations will continue, even cockless, for our protagonist. This is delusional though, really, innit? To think that cutting your dick off will stop your sexual thoughts. It'll probably aid in the battle against lust, I won't lie, but it's not gonna fix everything. Considering this, you could view our protagonist here as someone who perhaps hasn't got much impulse control, someone who isn't able to combat and temper temptations, and thus cannot find any inner peace, and has much of a diminished will. He sees cutting his dick off as taking a stand, but it's akin to taking the quote-unquote easy way out. It's not going to solve the problem and will just make things worse. In a world of comfort, practicing self-control is difficult. Everything is poised against you. Everything is set up to trip you up and lure you back inside the cocoon. If you reserve yourself away from sex, you're seen as a weirdo. If you don't conform to the current socio-sexual standards, you're a freak. That's how it works. But you've got to do it. You've got to walk your own path. You've got to be strong of will and bash your life into place until it looks like where you want it to. Cutting off your dick to escape the matrix is just a fantasy, really. That's the meaning of this song. It's saying not to take shortcuts, but to work on yourself thoroughly. Finally, we reach the end of the album with Goodbye Sober Day. Pretty wild song with time signatures that don't give a shit about you. With this song, we return to the head-spinning, disorienting shit, and it honestly makes me feel a little bit nauseous. The song is about turning to heroin after being disillusioned with life. Why be disillusioned with life? Well, just refer to everything that has been criticised across the album. The lyrics basically show how you can treat smackheads as subhuman, you can treat them as scum, and it's like socially acceptable to not help them and demean them and chat shit about them, calling them weak and whatever else. This really points out another facet of the nature of people, much the same as Retro Vertigo points out. They make their lives as colourful as possible, yet they are so callous to those who are truly suffering. It's almost like they are insulted by others' suffering, because their suffering is dulling their happiness. They're riding high, and they don't want anything to drag them down. You can see this a lot in the second verse. What word would they say if you went up in smoke? If I dug you up and then made soup of your bones? Now, mate, that's what. No one cares what's happening to smackheads. Some of the lyrics across the song from the perspective of the smackhead I appreciate quite a bit. There's this line, "The years sprung wings and flew away." One of the clearest and most self-explanatory lines on the album. But I feel it's pretty solid, pretty emotive. I feel most of what is being said in this song is pretty straight up in its meaning. Like that first verse is just about the strong sway drugs have in influencing a user's decisions, especially their decision to use. It's not as simple as calling it the user's choice. Of course, it's all delivered in that utterly schizophrenic way, where like a third of the words are spoken in a different tone of voice, constant up and down. I find the slow parts of this song to be pretty good, like the calm that heroin brings. But yet it is sad. I feel like this whole bridge part here is kind of like a ritual, the ritual of shooting up. All of these lines seem like metaphors for the process of using heroin. This is followed by the Kachak chant, which originally was performed for healing purposes, but over time it came to represent an army of monkeys. And you know what they say about drug addiction? They say it's the monkey on your back. Imagine a whole army of monkeys on your back. That's what the deal is there. That's how much he's being held down by this drug. The smackhead is on a steadfast path to his own destruction. Tale as old as time, really. This song, along with a couple of the other really disorienting songs, aren't some of my favourites on the album. I'm thinking about that Gollum song too, just because it's like they're intentionally trying to make you sick or something. I understand why they're doing that, but that's why they're not among my favourites. I think overall I probably enjoy this album on a musical level about as much as I ever did. However, I much appreciate the thoughtfulness stored within these songs, and I think basically everything I talked about in this review in terms of the meanings of these songs are things I discovered on this listen alone. In the past I probably chalked up everything that I was hearing and that was going on to just being the boys being schizo. Never thought for a second to try to understand the Mr. Bungle songs. It's funny to learn that a lot of the meanings in some of these songs are things that I myself preach to other people. Things like comfort being a poison, as well as Trey Spruance's contributions to the narrative with his lyrics about how we're soon to merge with a simulated world, and how shit is gonna get wacky when that happens. This album certainly has a lot to say. I mean, this is one of my longest reviews and there's only 10 songs on this thing. I appreciate it for that. Trying to figure out certain songs in this album sent me down some rabbit holes. I learnt about Balinese monkey chants, the Omega Point. I learnt that spray on clothes actually exists, and I saw some articles saying they were the future of clothing. But the way I see it, it would just be way messier than it's worth. I also learnt way more about eunuchs than I ever wished to. To be honest, I didn't really need to. I was just curious about how they piss, and found myself greatly disturbed after looking into that. My fault, really. Retro Vertigo is now my favourite song on the album, and my favourite Mr. Bungle song for that matter. That shit goes so hard. I think my top 3 songs here is probably pretty uncontroversial. Retro Vertigo, Sweet Charity, and Pink Cigarette. I feel a deal of these songs are more interesting conceptually than they are musically. That could be something of a criticism, but overall the album does a great job at satirizing all that retro nostalgia shit and Californian perspectives, so it's only a small critique all in all. I think this album contains Mike Patton's best vocal work. Like pretty much everything hits in the way it's intended, and there's a great variety to it as well. Like you have the vocal melody at the start of Retro Vertigo that feels so tender and caring, and then you have those parts where he's shouting in a really jarring way, like the jump back shark attack parts and shit like that. Something of a surreal masterpiece all in all. I give it 8.5 cats out of a possible 10 cats. Pretty much bordering on 9 cats. But yeah, that's about it for this review. Subscribe to the Catman show, leave a like, leave a comment. Goodbye.